Boas! Welcome to the second episode of Facing Declining Variations of Gambits. In this episode, we'll focus on the EVANS Gambit. If you're a fan of a godmatter, you surely know what am I talking about. But just to remind you, the EVANS Gambit starts off with e4, e5, and after knight f3 we have the Italian game, and when they play bishop c5, the so-called gioco piano, you play b4, boom, the EVANS Gambit. This, as you know, can be accepted by capturing with both the knight or the bishop, but in this series we don't look at the most obvious moves, we look at the declining moves. So, as in the previous video, I decided to organize all these variations into 3 groups, as I think it's easier to separate. So I'm going to move to Lichess Study now and show you that in the first group I just the bishop e6 move alone, on another is the Countergambit d5, and finally the other moves which are just moving the bishop, say to d6, to d4, e7, or even f8. So after bishop e6 you play e4, trying to trap the bishop, and they have 3 main moves of countering it, as you can see by that database. The worst one of those 3 is knight takes b4, saying I didn't take the pawn then, but I'm gonna take it now. But this just gives a much better position for white, because it attacks the bishop, forces it to move, and after he moves here or there, you're just gonna play c3, d4, and gain a tempo on the knight and tempo on the bishop, and you're gonna have a great position. An EVANS Gambit, but with more pieces out, a few extra tempos on your side. So, for example, other than knight takes b4, they can also play a6 or a5. If they play a5, I advise you to play b5. And if, for example, the knight moves to d4, you just take. And if they take with a pawn, you can just castle or play d3 and have a great position, because in a possible variation, if they castle, we have the f6 trying to castle, you can just play d3, and if they castle, bishop g5, f5, f4, e5, you have a great position. After b5, they can also play other moves, sure, but other moves such as knight back or knight b4, you can just take the pawn and threaten f7. One thing to note is that if they play knight e5, you take the knight and don't take the pawn, because if you take the pawn, you're losing to the move queen g5. If you take it takes here, and as in the Traxler video we saw, the threat of taking on g2 is too strong. So after knight d4, they can also take with the bishop. This move is a little bit more trickier, despite giving the advantage to white, to the fact after c3 and, for example, bishop b6, and you play d4, they can read you, for example, with the move queen h4. But here, I advise you to just castle. And if they take, you don't want to play rook e1, and if they go with the knight, you just play knight d2. Finally, the best move for black in this position is actually a6, where I don't advise you to chase the bishop, you just castle. And if, for example, they play d6, you play c3, and if they play knight f6, you just defend the pawn, and you play this calm, sort of like gioco piano, in which you have a slightly edge, which is probably not what you don't want in an EVANS, but crazy position, but at least you're not worse, you're not down the pawn. So moving on to the second chapter, in this case I'm going to focus on all of the moves they imply moving the bishop without being bishop e6. So in this case, starting off, for example, with bishop d4, but in this case you're just going to get a tempo on the bishop, forcing it to move. You can try to play a4, trapping the bishop, forcing a6 or even a5, but then you can get b5 and win this pawn. So you're going to have an excellent position. If they play, for example, in this position, if they play bishop e6, you can just castle. They can take the pawn, yes, but just lost the tempo. So they can play, for example, knight f6, you just play d4, and you are trending to take or to play here, or c3, build up the center. If they take, you just fork. So they can castle, but as you can see by the engine, you just have a great position after c3. Last of this group, I saved bishop e7, which is not a mistake or whatsoever, but I just advise you to castle. And if they play knight f6, just play d4, as in the previous variation. And if they take, you push e5, and you have some sort of Scotch Gambit in your hands, which is also an opening that has similarities to the EVANS Gambit. Finally, for last I saved d5, the Hein Countergambit. here after d5, the best move for white, you can see that he already gives advantage to white. The best move is just to take, forcing the capture on b4, but here you just castle. And if they try to take the pawn, you just take on e5, and you have already x-rayed the f7 pawn. And for example, if they play knight f6, just play d4, force the bishop to move, for example, here, and then bishop a6 just stops them from castling. And if they stay on this diagonal, then bishop e3, c4, you have a great position, and you don't not down the pawn. Another move you can face after another move you can face is knight f6, just going extra after the pawn. But here you can just take the pawn. If they take, you're gonna have a great center as you want in an Evans, and you're not down the pawn. So this step variation, if you play correctly, you will always have a good position. So this was the second video of the Facing Declining Variation series. I hope you like it. If you want to see more of these, just subscribe and like. If you have any suggestion for a future video, just leave a comment down below. And I will leave this Lichess study in the description if you want to check that out and explore more of this for yourself. Bye.